Hello, everyone. I'm Jules Lebris-Deblic, political advisor at the European People's Party, and welcome to this new episode of our EPP Family Talks with a focus on recovery in practice in our member states. Today, we are very glad to be with Mr. Gernot Blümel, Federal Minister of Finance of Austria. Thank you so much, Minister, for having accepted this invitation and for being with us today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks a lot for the invitation.
Thank you, Minister. If I may, a few words of introduction. Last September, your country, Austria, received its first portion of EU recovery funds, worth 450 million euros, of a total of 3.5 billion euros to finance projects aimed at industry digitalization, for instance, or climate protection, notably. And hence, the plan has clearly entered the implementation phase. So, Minister, two first questions. The first one, what does the EU recovery mean for you as a minister, of course, and as a citizen? And maybe if you could provide us an example of a flagship program you have in your national plan.
Thanks for the questions. First of all, let me thank EPP for organizing these virtual interviews because I think it's an important way to keep in contact with our EPP members. As you know, I was a member of the youth of the European People's Party. I was a vice president, and so I feel deeply for the work that EPP is doing, and thanks for doing a really great job. And best regards to all of your colleagues. Thank you for the question. I think the RRF is an important tool, not only for boosting investments after the corona crisis, but also because of the mechanism. It's a clear mechanism saying that money is flowing only if reforms are done. And I think this is a really important aspect. I can remember quite well the long night negotiations where the finance ministers prepared the amount of the RRF. And I have to say, it was a difficult negotiation. And to be also very honest, it took us some effort to also agree on the way that this was done. Because in the end, some countries receive more than other countries. So it's also an aspect of solidarity. But I think it's important after the corona crisis to be able to boost the whole economy of Europe. For the Austrian RRF, I can say that the main points will be digitalization and, of course, investments in green technologies. In both parts, we have still a way to go, but especially when it comes to green technologies, I think Austria is quite ahead of some other countries. Nevertheless, we want to use the money out of the RRF to still make a big advantage out of it.
Okay. And thank you so much for that. What are the main elements of your plan? You're talking about, of course, digitalization, but also the importance to fight against climate change for households, companies, and the citizens in general. How can they see and perceive in practical ways the effort made at the EU level and thanks to the initiatives taken by your government?
That's always the big question, how make the European level visible in national countries. Many of the programs that that are designed to pour money into our economies will, of course, have a European label. If I think about projects, which are mainly projects where investments from high technologically relevant companies are co-financed, then those investments will boost employees, will boost the economies, will boost wealth in the countries. So there is a direct benefit for each and every citizen out of the RRF money.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And looking at Austria's so-called eco-social tax reform, what does that mean concretely? And if you can elaborate and inform us and the EPP family about this initiative your government has taken.
Yeah. For 30 years now in Austria, we have the concept of eco-social market economy. It's the predecessor, social market economy, is much better known all over the world, but the combination of social and market was enlarged with the ecological part. So not only do we have the market economy, which means a free market that enables companies to gain profits and earn margins, but also that those margins can be redistributed to social necessities and to sustainability in an ecological sense. And the eco-social tax reform means that we wanted to implement this idea in the Austrian tax system, including, of course, a CO2 pricing for CO2 emissions, starting with a fixed price per ton next year, increasing until 26, and then being transformed to a certificate market and the trading system. And at the same time, we will reduce the different tax brackets for income taxes, but also, and this is one of the big aspects from my point of view, reducing taxes for companies, corporate taxes. That's, I think, a big and important point because in all over Europe, normally it's the opposite is discussed, increasing taxes for companies, but we wanted to go the opposite direction. And I think this is a real EPP approach. On the one hand side, caring for sustainability, caring for the environment. On the other hand side, making life more affordable via reducing taxes for people and at the same time boosting competitiveness for the economy via reducing the corporate taxes.
Thank you, Minister. You were talking about the EPP model in a certain extent, the EPP approach, and we know that sustainable finances matter. So, could you share with us some elements related to Austria's budget, and hence maybe provide insights about your commitment to debt reduction, clearly?
Yes, I think that's an important topic because if you take a look at the evaluations that all the countries get from mainly from independent research institutes, such as Standard & Poor's, Moody's, Fitch, or Morningstar, they all distribute ratings, which means that they evaluate the fiscal capacity and the economical strength of the different economies. And depending on those rankings, you pay higher or lower interest rates for your government bonds. And you can imagine that this, of course, makes a big difference if you pay, I don't know, 1% for your 10 years government bonds, or if you pay only 10 basis points for your government bonds. That's a huge difference. And one of the main criteria that those rating agencies look at is the capacity and capability of repaying your debts. And one of those key aspects is also the debt to GDP ratio, which means how many debts do you have in relation to your GDP, your economical strength. And we had a debt to GDP ratio of about 70% before the Corona crisis. We distributed a lot of money to help employees and economies in Austria during this crisis, and we keep up doing so. So our deficit level rose in the last year to 6%, and the debt to GDP ratio to approximately 84%. But with this budget, if economy keeps growing, of course, we will manage to reduce the debt to GDP ratio until the budgetary end of framework, which is 2025, to nearly 70% again. And that's a big achievement because on the one hand side, we invest a lot of money, we lower tax rates, but also what we do is lower the debt to GDP ratio, which means that we will maintain and keep up our good ratings, which will enable us to keep up the low debt, the low interest level, and be able to borrow at a very good price for Austria.
No, that's very interesting. And as you explained, the very importance between reduction of debt and deficits, but also investments. So this is what you're doing with your investments package and your plan. Finally, Minister, how do you feel and see the upcoming debate at the EU level, talking about the future of economic governance, fiscal rules, budgetary rules? It just started this week, and it will be certainly a long process. What's your position, and what do you share with your colleagues at the EU level?
This is going to be one of the big and crucial debates for Europe in the next decade. The question, should we adjust the fiscal rules, or are they sufficient and should they only be better implemented? To be honest, that's not a debate that goes along party family lines, but it's more a debate that goes along lines of economically prudent countries and those who are in favor of spending more. I tried to forge an alliance of responsibility for fiscal prudence, for fiscal sustainability over the summer. And in the meantime, we have all in all 8 states that are in favor of keeping up the necessity of reducing debt levels to ensure enough fiscal space in the future again. Because that's the crucial point. It's not because of the beauty of a fiscally sound budget. It's a necessity to create fiscal space in order to be able to help our economies, our people, our companies, if help is needed, like, for example, during Corona crisis. Just take a look at the situation in different countries. Some countries had enough fiscal capacity to care for their own people, for their own companies, for their own economies. And some countries simply did not have enough capacity. They needed help. And we gave those help via the money pouring in from the RRF. But it should be our goal, our common goal, to prepare already now for the next crisis and ensure enough fiscal space to be able to help when it's getting difficult again. Looking back, during the last 10 years, we had 2 major global economical crises. So the likelihood is quite clear that there might be another one in a certain amount of years, and we should have enough fiscal buffers when we enter those crises, whatever they might be.
This message regarding our common capacity to tackle future shocks is very clear. Thank you so much, Minister. It was really interesting and with very precise explanations about both your national situation and also debates at the EU level. Thank you so much for your participation.
It was my pleasure. All the best.
Thank you.